Welcome back to the Embedded Insights video series. As you can see, I've decided to ditch the step count thing and just spend a bit of time in my happy place, which is the River Hamble on an electric boat. And the purpose of really this is to demonstrate something about technology and sustainability. The video content is really all about trying to understand how we can be a bit more sustainability in technology. It's a massive topic, and I think it's quite important. So I've made sure that I can hire this boat on a tax deductible basis to take the benefit of that topic. Sustainability in technology is enormous for a whole raft of reasons, and it's becoming very, very trendy, especially in the world of tech procurement, primarily because everyone knows that technology does add a lot of environmental damage, or can add a lot of environmental damage. There's a couple of sort of facets to that. The obvious ones are things like hardware, buying computers. They use a lot of very rare materials, and so mining those rare materials can be quite environmentally costly and not ideal from an environmental perspective. But also then, the manufacturing process is quite energy intensive, so that uses a lot of energy and therefore can release a lot of greenhouse gases. Then you've got to ship physical hardware from wherever it's made, usually in Asia and China, over to wherever it is, and in our case the UK. So the environmental impacts of that are pretty hardcore. And then finally, what do you do with it when you finish with it? We're in this cycle at the moment of having to refresh hardware to keep up with the pace of software. People buy mobile phones on a 2 or 3 year lease basis. So what do you do with disposal of the asset? And all those sort of things are important from a hardware perspective in sustainability. The sort of more interesting and slightly less obvious impacts are the energy usage of technology. And as everyone moves towards the cloud, which we spoke about a few episodes ago, you start to notice that there's a significant portion of the environmental impact of technology being in energy usage, primarily from data centers. As we get to a position where the cloud expands and artificial intelligence and other technologies take over, we're in a position where we're using so much energy in data centers that it is becoming a problem. And data centers, for those of you who haven't seen one, it's just a load of computers in a big room, yeah? But if you think the combined impact of all of those computers running at full throttle to process pictures of the Pope in a puffer jacket or all the stuff we discussed before is enormous. And I think there's something like 10% of the world's energy consumption is actually now in data centers, and that's only going to get worse as we embrace things like artificial intelligence and some of the bigger, more complex applications. So sustainability in tech is important. We all need to understand it, and it's really all about how do we minimize our impact on the environment from technology in the context of sustainability. So a lot of people get sustainability mixed up with something called social value. There's also something called ESG, or environmental and social guidelines or governance. And so I think it's just worth talking about that a little bit. Sustainability directly relates to the environment and its ability to deliver circular economy and sustainability. We use something, it doesn't deplete so much. Social value is really more of a broad topic around how you look at a broader set of benefit to society. Environment being one key part of it, but also things like engaging with SMEs. In the government's case, COVID recovery has been a big facet of social value. So social value is broader than sustainability. And then the environmental and sustainability governance piece is really all about reporting. So you'll see people having ESG policies on their website or in their company brochures, and that's really how do they feel they're managing their approach to the environment and other metrics to support the UN's Sustainable Development Goals, or those sorts of metrics, and make sure they are presenting an image of them being a company that really cares about the environment. And that presenting an image piece is really key. I think we're in a position now where sustainability has become a very trendy topic. Everyone wants to get involved in it. And so there's a lot of people who are greenwashing, presenting images of how good they are in the context of the environment, and it's not always the case. And I think it's incumbent upon us, especially with regards to technology companies, to scratch a little bit beneath the surface and ask some awkward questions about exactly what should be the right answer with regards to dealing with companies and their approach to environmental. If you look at where we are right now, we're on the River Hamble. There is literally not another person in sight apart from the people walking their dogs behind us. We're surrounded by beautiful trees, very clean water. We're very, very lucky. When manufacturing happens in places like China and India and those sorts of places, a lot of the waste is just disposed into environments like this, and there's a lot of plastic and those sorts of things we need to really think about. And so when we're engaging with companies, especially in the context of technology, we need to ask questions about supply chain, about their approach to sustainability, and then find evidence that backs up their approach such that we don't just take it for granted. So I suppose the key question here is, why is it important? Sustainability is obviously important for a whole raft of reasons, but sustainability in technology is pretty key. And I think, as a technology industry, we need to accept we're doing a lot of damage. We need to address that. And obviously the environment and the sustainability of the planet, it doesn't get much more important than that. But if you strip away the obvious, there's some commercial reasons why sustainability is really key. The first one is cost. Using recycled goods fundamentally should be cheaper than mining it out of the ground. And although we haven't quite got that balance right yet in society, certainly there is a move towards finding alternative sources of materials from waste products that is a lot easier than digging them out of the ground. Some really good examples of that are some companies in the UK. They're doing things like bio-leaching, a company called N2S specifically, where they're extracting raw materials from componentry using enzymes, so there's no environmental impact, or very little environmental impact, in extracting that gold or copper or whatever they want to from the printed circuit boards they're processing, as opposed to digging a big hole and extracting it through rocks. That's a pretty obvious thing. So I think cost of using recycled materials in technology is becoming a thing. I think also there's some sort of supply chain issues as well. Let's be honest, we're at the middle of 2023 at the moment. There's quite a lot of geopolitical tension around, and as that gets worse, some of the relationships with Asia and China could get really quite serious. And so we're in a position where we probably need to find alternatives to just buying new stuff from the manufacturers in Asia, and try and think about, in supply chain terms, are there alternatives? In most people's homes, there are plenty of old computers that they just don't throw away because they're a bit worried they've got bank details on them, and I'm one of those people. And that concept is really down to sort of urban mining. You can process all that old computing technology through a process of urban mining and reusing components we've got readily available in our houses through a recycling process to drive hardware manufacturing locally and overcome some of the potential geopolitical supply chain issues which are likely to happen in the next few years. All that said, to one side, cost shouldn't be the main driver. And as I said previously, the environment is ultimately the big win here. We all need to do our thing to make sure we're conforming to the sustainability of the planet. And if as a technology industry we haven't got our head around that, we need to be really careful. So true to form, in a video made about sustainability and the environment just pissed all over us, yeah? And so I'm a little bit moist and dripping from my glasses, for which I apologise. But it is relevant to the conversation, and I think it's really important that we get to the point where we all understand that the environment is changing. And that's largely driven by greenhouse gases. And greenhouse gases are a direct output of energy consumption, and energy consumption is a massive problem in the industry. And the sort of carbon assessments that we're doing in the sustainability world around sort of three main areas, and they're called Scope 1, 2 and 3. Scope 1 and 2 are fairly easy to measure. It's sort of your own approach to consumption or production of energy that uses greenhouse gases. But Scope 3 is really hard to measure because that's really measuring your portion of the greenhouse gases that you're using in conjunction with your supply chain. And historically, in some of the large cloud providers, it's been very difficult to get hold of Scope 3 emissions. In fact, only probably Microsoft and maybe Google at a push have published very accurate data around Scope 3 emissions associated with their cloud services. The other main providers are still working on it, and I think we're going to get something in terms of an update from people like AWS and IBM over the course of the next 12 months or 18 months or so. But the important thing from a sustainability perspective is we need to ask these questions and put pressure on the providers to give us information so we can make informed choices about which providers we use to make sure they're sustainable. And if we don't push that hard, we're just going to end up perpetuating the problem, especially as the mass adoption of cloud and those sort of things is becoming a major issue in our industry. So that said, for my sake and Harry's sake, please don't get us any more wet. Let's stop the raining happening as much as we can and get us into a position where we're asking the right questions and buy from sustainable technology providers. So as we there's a bit of a nuance coming up here, as we navigate our way through this little inlet down the River Hamble, you ask yourself the question, how do you navigate the complexities of sustainability? And I think, there's a lot of things you can do. We've covered off in asking the right questions, etc. But questions like what skills do you need? What considerations are there as a tech professional to make sure you're doing the right thing from a sustainability perspective? The skills really is not that mature at the moment. There aren't really that many technology environmental specialist consultants, and getting hold of those is quite difficult, but actually it's not massively complex. It's really just asking the right questions, as we said before. So understanding when you're buying hardware, when you're buying services, what is the impact on the environment to that, and just push the supplier to make sure they're giving you those bits of information. Beyond that, taking an approach to hardware as a really good example, to try and think about policies and procedures you can do to enforce a slightly better sustainability angle. So, for instance, hardware refresh cycles are typically between 3 and 5 years. So we go out and buy new PCs or new servers within 3 and 5 years cycles. But you don't really need to do that. Most people can survive on a 10-year-old laptop within reason, as long as it's maintained and as long as it's not required for something really complex. And similarly with servers and other sort of pieces of hardware storage devices, you don't really need to refresh them unless you've got a really good business need. And although some of the manufacturers will sort of force your hand a little bit and say it's not supported anymore, primarily because they want to sell more stuff, you can buy sort of certain maintenance packs or work with other third-party maintainers to get support for that equipment, even though it's beyond the natural life of the equipment provider. Not necessarily for everyone. Some people see that as too risky, but I think personally we all need to be a little bit more considerate where it comes to sort of refreshing hardware and going down that route. The other option you've got is buying recycled materials. Or recycled hardware assets. There is plenty of people out there who are recycling hardware assets such as laptops. Look, some ducks. Quite happy about that. Recycling. Oh no! So after I've got over the excitement of seeing some ducks, fundamentally there are plenty of people out there who are able to provide hardware or services even in a sustainable way. And if you do a little bit of Googling around technology and circular economy, which is a very useful phrase to use, you'll find plenty of people who are appropriately selling hardware that has been reused or repurposed or remanufactured to support a future use. And then finally, disposal of hardware is a key thing as well. Don't just chuck things in the bin. Obviously most people don't from a security perspective, but try and find people who will give you a certification that say that they are definitely going to reuse the components in a way that is sustainable, such that they're not just going to go to landfill and cause a problem for everyone else. In sort of summary, technology's got a long way to go. We all need to educate ourselves on how to best do things. Fundamentally, you need to make sure that you're not causing more damage than you can, unless you can avoid it. So fundamentally, you need to get yourself in a position where you understand exactly what you're trying to do from an environmental perspective and make that as important as cost, if not more so, for the purposes of keeping the planet safe. How blissful is this? It's like your perfect Sunday, isn't it? Just like jogging along, not caring the world, ducks, lots of them. No paddle boarders, that's the other problem we have in the summer. But then you can just come to the pub and sit in the blissful ignorance of life. I love it.